fuck is this?
Yesterday I indicated I might make a video on the recent Amazon tax. Well, today I'm going to make that video, because I'm somewhat intrigued as to what people think about what the supposed fair share of tax is. As someone that is self-employed, I have to do my taxes myself, which I do around Christmas time because I'm lazy and don't do it the rest of the year when I could. I actually get some enjoyment from this, and that's because I feel like I'm paying my fair share based on the tax codes and the system in place. I was actually quite happy when they raised the tax bar in 2010-11 time, because honestly it was far too low originally. And I know before anyone jumps in and says this, in the UK especially, that does not mean people are not in poverty. The parameters of what constitutes someone being in poverty, and then the subsequent counter-argument of absolute poverty. We're not going to be discussing that, and I'm not going to waste my time character assassinating people because I can't be bothered. It's also intellectually lazy. But today I want to talk about why some companies don't think they should, or go out of their way to do so, and what we should do to crack down on those that evade it as much as they can. And one of the best candidates is Amazon. They are guilty, and we have a couple of articles that I'd like to go over covering why they are guilty, because last year Amazon, with a turnover of £2 billion, paid $1.7 million in tax, and this is a reduction on what they paid the year before. In what universe is a company with a turnover of $2 billion in this country paying $1.7 million fair? I think we can all agree here that is not fair. I have heard many arguments when it comes to how much people pay in tax and what is considered fair, especially when it comes to, for example, football players. They earn hundreds of thousands of pounds a week. Over a certain amount of money, they are paying almost half of that in tax. So some earn even more, so that they then get what they should be getting if they weren't being taxed so much. It's a debate for another day as to whether or not it's fair. I'm somewhat indifferent because I don't earn their levels of money, but I do obviously believe they should pay their fair share, so how that is ascertained is the part I'm intrigued with more than the actual amount they pay. With Amazon, this is one of those really irritating moments, because I remember, and I've mentioned this on a number of occasions, that Amazon deliver from Jersey to me. Jersey is a crown dependency, also a tax haven. This irritates me, because they should not be exempt because of that. So, Britain could impose an Amazon tax on internet giants to help save the UK's high streets, Philip Hammond has said. From personal experience, I live near Dover. Dover's high street is almost a barren wasteland now. It has absolutely fallen apart. Companies collapsing and just leaving in general. There was supposedly going to be a renovation going on in Dover. I'm yet to be convinced of this. The internet giant sparked fury last week after it emerged its tax bill fell last year and it paid a meager $1.7 million. Meanwhile, Britain's high streets have faced a bloodbath, with some of the country's best-known brands having to close down shops, costing thousands of jobs. We hear the Conservatives brag about employment being at an all-time high. Okay, let's talk about this shift in people's choice to go for the cheaper option of buying online than going to a shop, which has then led to people losing their jobs because of convenience. But at the same time, people have suffered as well because taxes are not being properly collected, and we will get to what it should be in a moment, because it's a very simple set of mathematics. House of Fraser this morning teetered on the brink of collapse and was calling in administrators before Mike Ashley of Sports Direct bought him for $90 million. Shortly after news of the rescue, the Chancellor said he backs EU moves to go after tech giants and make them pay their fair share of tax, and I am fully on board with this. If companies like Amazon, Google and Facebook want to avoid paying taxes and a fair share, because they will do that. They will find loopholes, and there have been many that companies have abused for years. Not just companies. Comedians. Jimmy Carr is a perfect example of someone who abused it. Recently, I believe David Beckham, Gary Lineker were caught up in a tax evading scandal. Honestly, by setting up some kind of company, honestly, it was just nonsense. Pay your fair way. The tax codes exist for a reason. Pay your fair share. It's not rocket science here. I know you don't want to pay as much tax, but you are earning millions. You pay your fair way, or you leave. And I think when companies start to lean on governments to give them some kind of special dispensation is utterly ludicrous. I know people don't like being reminded of the past, but a lot of these big companies that grew to be what they were not paying their fair share during the times of both Conservative and Labour governments. Both are guilty, and they've only started taking action because they realise there are deficits that need to be accounted for, or because enough people have caused enough of a stir that they realise, yeah, we actually should tax you. But these big companies lean on governments for these leeways, or they will then threaten to go to another country. Well, I say, fuck off then. I don't use Amazon anyway. I rarely use Facebook. Only Google is the one that I really use. And if Google wants to leave, that's fine. You can fuck off too. Because you are big companies, and while you have lots of employees, you are a bad example, or even better, a good example of a bad company. And you can threaten to cost thousands of jobs if you like. It's not like anyone's truly innocent. I know Apple's not mentioned on this list, but I know they have a lot of employees in third world countries who earn very, very little money for the work they put in. There are always these nasty little reminders that these companies are entirely driven by profit. You are basically Ferengi. Congratulations? Now quickly, because I'm going to forget otherwise, we should address the corporation tax, because this is the part that's relevant, where we have here from 2014 to 2018. I think for this we're going to focus on the main rate, which is 19%. 19% of a profit of 2 billion. Just work this out. If 1% is 20 million, and they only paid 1.7 million, how many times has Theresa May kissed Jeff Bezos's dome and stroked his lobes? Honestly. Not that any company is truly innocent here, but seriously. Or government, for that matter. You should all be ashamed of yourselves. I'm all for employment. But since we know that it's not all what everyone thinks it is, in that there is a consequence, and the consequence is the cost of the high street, which I think also would have a negative impact on the social elements of towns. Surely governments would want to do more to preserve that. Oh, and 19%? Seriously, is 380 million. You owe us 378 million plus. Jeff, stop spending it on turtle wax for your chrome dome, and pay your fair share, you bitch. So now we should probably address how on earth it is that Amazon managed to pay so little in tax in the UK. So I'm going to read from an article from CrestonReeves.com. There are a number of reasons for this. A big warehouse in any country doesn't automatically mean that you are taxable there. To encourage overseas trade, most double tax agreements say that warehouses do not constitute a taxable presence. So what is it about Amazon that creates in profits? Amazon doesn't sell many of its own goods. Where it does, these are manufactured abroad. It sells electronically supplied services, but these are delivered from a server which could be anywhere, which is one of the main problems to begin with. I personally believe if people are using a product of yours in a country, and they're buying it in that country, then it should be taxed in that country. Because if you're only paying 1.7 million in tax here, but you're generating 2 billion in profit, then where's the tax that you're not paying in this country going? Which country are you paying it to? Because I saw your tax thing for America, it wasn't exactly like you were paying much there either, and I had heard that you threatened to pull out of a certain area of the US anyway, if you were threatened with having to pay more tax, which you should. Honestly, at this point, it's a bit of a joke. I'm not recommending people boycott Amazon at all, by the way. I just don't care for it. Now, just before we finish today's video, I want to go back to the original article, because there are a few little bits that I want to address, and I think they're relevant to the points. And I do agree with the EU on this, by the way. I'm not totally anti-EU. When they come up with ideas like this, I'm on board. The Brussels bloc earlier this year unveiled plans to tax the revenues of internet firms like Amazon, Google and Facebook, rather than profits. So they have to contribute to countries where they do lots of business. Exactly what I already said. I support this. Absolutely. But Mr. Hammond warned if international efforts to overhaul rules fail, then Britain will go it alone and impose its own measures. This has me concerned. I think a lot of people who watch who are somewhat Labour-leaning, and I don't mean current Labour, I mean just left Labour, not the current, would be concerned. Because the Conservatives, while they have gone out of their way to tax more companies that Labour didn't do when they were in office, they haven't done enough to tax them correctly. So much so that Amazon has managed to get away with this absolute farce of a tax bill. Are you kidding me? He told Sky News, "I want to ensure that the high street remains resilient, and that we also make sure that taxation is fair between businesses doing business the traditional way and those doing business online. That requires us to renegotiate international tax treaties, because many of the big online businesses are international companies. And yet you still can't get Mark Zuckerberg to come to the UK to answer questions about that whole Cambridge Analytica thing. How precious." The European Union has been talking about a tax on online platform businesses based on the value generated, which is fine. It's just a restatement of what I've already agreed on. To finish, I am intrigued to know what you all think, and I also want to state clearly, I am not against companies going out of their way to abuse the rules already in place to pay less tax. I'm not against it at all. If I had that position, I would do the same thing. I think most of us would, because we're all very greedy shits. Those of us that aren't socialist anyway. Or communist. Nope, same thing. In any case, I do want to make it clear, just because they can do it, doesn't mean we should then not go out of our way to close the loopholes and make it quite clear that these companies cannot get away with abusing our systems to the point where they do not contribute fairly, as they should, all the while simultaneously damaging the high street by taking profits from companies that would then pay their fair share in taxes. By not doing that, you are contributing towards killing the high street itself. You, Jeff, can suck one of my noodly appendages and then pay the $378 million you owe us for last year. You greedy, Ferengi cunt. Now, I hope everyone has a lovely Monday, and thank you all for listening.
Oh, goddowns.
In your ass.
Imagine my shock